Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Regional Plan Review virtual Q&A. Next slide, please. My name is Kathleen Frelick. I'm a planner with our regional policy team, and I'll be moderating today's session on social policy. I would like to remind attendees at this time that the event is being recorded and will be posted on Shape Your City following today's meeting. I'd like to start by giving some quick instructions on how today's session will work. First of all, if you would like to use closed captioning, please click the CC button on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Next slide. You may leave the session at any time and return by clicking the Leave button on the upper right corner of the screen. Next slide, please. We will be answering questions following a short presentation, but you can post comments and questions throughout the session by using the chat box to the right of the presentation screen. Next slide, please. If you would like to include your name with your question, you can type it in the box asking for your name. However, you are also welcome to post questions anonymously. Just a note that if you include your name with your question, it will be included with the public record. Next slide, please. You may then type your question in the box which says Ask a Question and press Enter. We will be answering questions in order that they are received at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So for today's meeting, we are going to be giving a short presentation on the regional plan review and the role of social policy in our work. The presenter and a panel of experts will be available following the presentation. And as I mentioned, the session is being recorded and will be posted on the Project Shape Your City page following the meeting. There will be a variety of tools for you to provide additional comments and questions on the Shape Your City page, and we are also accepting comments by email and by phone, and that information will be provided later in the meeting. Next slide, please. So I'll now turn things over to Leah Perrin, who's a principal planner for our regional policy team, and she's going to be presenting today's topic.
Thanks, Kathleen. Again, my name is Leah Perrin. I'm a principal planner with regional planning. And next slide, please. So we're here today because we're reviewing the regional plan, which means we're evaluating our land use policies and making sure they represent the direction that council would like to set. We're contemplating how the municipality is physically organized and growing. We kicked off this phase of public engagement on May 20th at Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee, which is the primary body for this work, advisory body for this work. Today's session is focused on social policy. Slide 11, please. Now, just to step back and make sure that everyone understands the regional plan, it is a strategic document. It was the first planning document adopted after amalgamation that provided a region-wide vision for land use. First adopted in 2006, it provided a comprehensive outline of how growth and development should take place until 2031. Slide 12. This presents the progression of the regional plan over the past 15 years. In 2006, we approved the original regional plan, and in 2014, we finalized our first review. You might recognize the name RP+5, which was the brand for that review. And you can see we're aiming to complete this review in 2022. Slide 13. The themes and directions document outlines the key ideas and planning issues that we will address in the review. It's a chance to step back and ask everyone, do we have this right? Are we headed in the right direction? The feedback we receive will help us to focus and provide direction for the remainder of the work that we're doing through the review. Next slide. There are also a few key questions we're trying to answer through the review. The first is, how do we locate housing and employment in smart, strategic locations so that growth can happen easily and in a way that furthers the municipality's most important goals? Slide 15. So we can break this down into two key questions. First, how are we growing? We need to evaluate the projected demand for housing and employment today and into the future. To do this, we're relying on two key pieces of information: our housing and population analysis and our industrial and employment land analysis. The second question we ask is, where should we grow? Once we know how much we're going to grow, we begin to assess where new housing and jobs can be accommodated. It isn't only about where there are pieces of land that can be developed, but where that land is located as it relates to the location of services and infrastructure. We think about how and where we can infill, or where we should expand the city into new greenfield areas. This is done with careful consideration as to how development can be serviced with water, sewer, transit, recreation, and studying how we should be preserving or protecting important pieces of ecological or cultural land. And as Regional Council has identified aspirations for a sustainable future, such as through our integrated mobility plans, mode share targets, and the emissions reduction targets in Halifax, we can update our modeling and assess how different land use scenarios might interact with these long-term objectives. Next slide. The themes and directions document includes 11 themes. They're highlighted on this slide, and an overview of each theme is available to you on our website, shapeyourcityhalifax.ca/regional-plan. Today, we're focusing on theme 5, next slide, which is called Social Planning for Community Wellbeing. In recent years, the municipality has begun to clarify its role in directly and indirectly supporting initiatives related to affordable housing, community health, and well-being. The municipality does not and should not work on social planning alone. HRM works with other levels of government, arm's-length organizations, nonprofit organizations, and community groups on initiatives that advance diversity and inclusion, equitable and meaningful representation, and meeting the basic needs of those who call HRM home. Examples of well-established partnerships that are working towards social initiatives are the Housing and Homelessness Partnership and the Halifax Food Policy Alliance. Slide 18. In April 2020, HRM adopted a social policy administrative order with goals to, quote, strengthen community health and well-being, enhance equity and inclusion, and build on social assets and community capacity. This administrative order also set up a social policy committee, which is made up of people across HRM. Social policy takes place across municipal departments in many ways, through recreation programming, community grants, community development, land use planning, diversity and inclusion training, youth services, climate change planning, parks planning, public transit, and active transportation planning. So the Social Policy Committee is analyzing how we work in community and how we use a social lens. As this work advances, we will include it in the regional plan. Slide 19. Currently, the regional plan identifies and prioritizes areas where we expect to see significant growth in new housing and jobs. Some existing neighborhoods may not have been identified as growth areas or new infrastructure or for new infrastructure like transit or central services. Or some neighborhoods may be feeling the pressures of gentrification resulting from lots of new infill development. These situations can exacerbate existing inequities and create a heightened sensitivity to the impacts of development. This includes a lack of access to safe, adequate, and affordable housing, good food and services and amenities, as well as the ability to respond to climate change and disasters. We work directly with vulnerable communities and need to continue to build on this work to identify better tools that will strengthen neighborhoods while the city is growing and changing. Examples include community benefit action planning and community land trusts. Finally, community-based partnerships are so important to our work and we'll continue to provide support for these. Slide 20. The municipality's role in supporting and encouraging affordable housing has increased steadily over the past several years. We recognize that housing is a right. Through involvement with the Housing and Homelessness Partnership and Anti-Poverty Solutions Strategy, HRM has developed relationships with nonprofit housing organizations, for-profit developers, and federal and provincial levels of government. Since the 2014 regional plan, HRM has worked on several initiatives, including the 2015 Housing Needs Assessment, a forthcoming rental registration bylaw, supporting municipal housing first projects, and directing the federal Rapid Housing Initiative funding. This slide lists the actions we'll be focused on during the regional plan review, And if you have interest in this topic, we'd also encourage you to come to our housing session on Monday evening at 6:30 p.m. Next slide, please. It is estimated that between 1 in 5 and 1 in 7 households in HRM experience food insecurity. HRM has consistently ranked in the top 3 Canadian cities with the highest rates of household food insecurity. While the rising cost of food continues to outpace income and the challenges posed by COVID-19, these rates could worsen. The municipality has recognized that it has an important role to play in promoting community food security. So in 2020, the municipality partnered with the Halifax Food Policy Alliance to develop the Just Food Action Plan. Just Food is centered on food justice and working together toward a region where no one is hungry, where food and people are celebrated, and our local food system is prosperous and sustainable. The regional plan review will advance our commitment to design communities that promote food security by requiring consideration of access to food and impact on the food system in new and updated planning policies. Slide 22. Creating equitable, complete communities requires us to understand the lived experiences of the diverse residents that call HRM home. The municipality must continue to develop an understanding of the effects that our existing policies may disproportionately have and affect historically underserved and underrepresented groups. Public participation during planning projects provides an important opportunity for the municipality to hear from residents. However, traditional engagement tools often only reach those who are already engaged or have the loudest voices, and some have left many others out of the conversation. Alone, these tools produce narrow representation in terms of demographics, perspectives, and experiences. So through our work, we're looking at ways to improve our engagement practices, and the regional plan will make sure that the plan supports these efforts. Slide 23. Council has recently created 2 initiatives to partner with the Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian communities to begin to address some of the most important issues identified by these communities. And there are a number of actions contained in these documents that planning and development will need to act on quickly. The Cornwallis Task Report resulted in a number of actions, including this week renaming the park to Peace and Friendship Park. And we also started the process to rename Cornwallis Street. More generally, the report gave us direction for recognizing and commemorating the Indigenous history in the lands now known as Halifax Regional Municipality. The African Nova Scotian Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan directed us to consider opportunities for community benefits agreements, review policies and regulations that may have disproportionately negative impacts in African Nova Scotian communities, support for the Acoma Master Plan, review of community boundaries and commemorations, remediation of contaminated sites in African Nova Scotian communities, and infrastructure funding for those communities. We're continuing to work with our partners in diversity and inclusion and responding to the calls for action contained in these documents. Slide 24. The Nova Scotia Accessibility Act explains the barriers residents face, including that persons with disabilities disproportionately live in conditions of poverty. There is certainly diversity among persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities continue to face attitudinal and environmental barriers that prevent them from achieving their full potential and equal participation in society, and are subject to multiple forms of discrimination and face additional barriers. So achieving accessibility will improve the independence and well-being of persons with disabilities. So through the regional plan review, we will be reviewing our planning documents to make sure they are aligned with the goal of bringing HRM closer to being a city for people of all abilities, ages, and backgrounds. Slide 25. That's it for the quick presentation today. This slide includes our information. You can contact us by email at regionalplan@halifax.ca or by telephone 902-233-2501. And our project website is the source of truth for all of our material. Please visit at www.shapeyourcityhalifax.ca/regional-plan. I'll pass it back to Kathleen at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. So we're now going to move into the Q&A portion of the session. Can you switch to slide 26, please? Thank you. So as a reminder, participants are welcome to submit questions and comments through the chat. Please try to keep the wording respectful, and I will read the questions in the order that they are received. I'll then direct them to one of our panelists for a response. And we can move through the questions as much as possible. So feel free to post questions. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So I will quickly introduce our panelists while we wait for some questions to get posted. So Kate Green is the Regional Policy Program Manager with Regional Planning. Paul Johnston is the Director of Government Relations and External Affairs. Mary Chisholm is our Senior Policy Advisor with Government Relations and External Affairs. Mepfumo Chidzanga is our Diversity and Inclusion Advisor in Regional Planning. Jill McClellan is a planner with Regional Planning with a focus on affordable housing initiatives. Letitia Smiley is a planner with our Regional Planning team, and she has a focus on food policy. And Leah Perrin, who you have been listening to present, is also going to stay on the line, and we are available to answer any questions that you may have. I'll also add for our attendees, if you are interested in submitting questions separately or privately and not through the event, we're happy to receive those questions via email, by phone, or through the Shape Your City page. But we'll wait another little bit to see if we can receive any questions. Thank you. While we wait for any questions, I'll ask one of my own. I'm particularly interested in the work that the municipality has been doing around access to food. So I was wondering, Letitia is here, if you could sort of describe the work that Just Food has been doing and the ongoing project.
Great. Thanks very much, Kathleen. For those of you who may not be familiar with me, my name is Letitia Smiley, and I am part of the regional planning team. And as they were talking earlier, in 2019, Regional Council approved and formalized our relationship with the Halifax Food Policy Alliance, which is a collection of local organizations and individuals working across the food system, really working towards decreasing food insecurity and strengthening our local food system. So as part of that motion in 2019, we agreed to work together to co-lead the development of an action plan for our region. So that led to the birth of Just Food. And so at this point, we're really still very much in the early stages of Just Food. We've been working and building on a food charter, which was designed through community engagement in 2018. It lays out a number of principles for Just Food, and we've been trying to advance that to identify some goals for our local food system, and then working towards action. So the intention for Just Food is really to be an action plan that has strategic actions and then dedicates the resources such as policy, funding, programs, partnerships, and performance measurement to really make sure that those actions become a reality and we see positive change in our local food system. So we've been having a series of workshops. We just had our first workshop in March with people who are working in or supporting food. And really, it was start to learn more about each other, to find out about a lot of the amazing work that's already happening, which is what Just Food is building on. And then starting to work collaboratively together towards what are the actions and the things that we want Just Food to achieve. So we're actually having another workshop number 2, which is open to anybody who's interested in participating. And that's happening next Thursday and Friday. So there is information on that on Shape Your City Food Action, if you look for that. And it is, as I say, open to everybody. And again, we're doing sort of identification of what people want Just Food to achieve, and then providing a space for us to work collaboratively towards what's needed to actually make those a reality. So we'll continue doing engagement over the summer and into the fall. So there are lots of opportunities for people to participate in the ways in which they would like to participate in the plan. And then looking probably end of the fall, sort of Christmas, early spring, to have a draft plan and more engagement as we go out and try to figure out what's needed to make the actions a reality. So yeah, there's lots of great stuff happening in Just Food, and it really is about collective impact. So recognizing that while the municipality certainly has lots of roles and things that we need to be committing to and carrying forward, we also need to bring others to the table to help us do that, and also to take on some of the commitments on their own and really work together collaboratively to make positive change in our local food system.
Perfect. Thank you, Letitia. So I guess another question that we have in around social policy is sort of the role that the province plays in affordable housing versus the role that the municipality plays. So just wondering how the municipality is considering the recent Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission report in our work. And I'm going to direct this question to Jill McClellan.
Thank you. So my name is Jill McClellan. I'm a planner with our regional planning group with a focus on affordable housing. And I'll say it was really exciting to see the Affordable Housing Commission report come out. A lot of the initiatives that it is suggesting are initiatives we've been exploring as well too. That includes looking at community land trust, expanding or promoting shared housing, which is a form of group housing or people living under different leases. The commission report also spoke to a need to have a housing need assessment and a housing strategy, which are all initiatives HRM has been exploring as well. So it was really, really exciting to see all of that sort of work. And also just an acknowledgement too that this is something that municipalities do need to play a role in. That's something the commission spoke to, is expanding the tools municipalities have to support affordable housing. So it was really refreshing and exciting to see that as well. I don't know if Paul or Mary have anything to add on that as well. I won't put you on the spot.
Great, thanks, Jill. I think in addition to all of this work, one of the more interesting things for me as a planner is sort of how we engage with our communities, in particular trying to hear from a diversity of voices. So I'm wondering how we are looking at engagement practices to consider diversity. And I'll start with Matbumo on this question, and if any of our other panelists would like to jump in, please feel free.
Thank you, Kathleen. So as many of you may know, our traditional engagement practices, especially for planning, they include public information meetings, maybe on-site signage. Some planning policy projects also have unique engagement strategies that they employ. But the issue is that oftentimes our engagement isn't right size, so it can be quite rigid, sometimes lacks the transparency regarding the purpose, the process, and the scope of the decision that's being made. Sometimes we have traditional engagement approaches that are set up to be, confrontational, and ultimately the participation, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, tends to have a bias towards folks who are already engaged or who have allowed a voice. And most recently, we've been grappling with the reality that we've underutilized a lot of the new technology that's out there, and given our current situation with the pandemic, we've almost been forced to use more of the technology that's out there, the online engagement. So what a newer holistic approach to our engagement looks like is it's a renewed approach, one that seeks to make our engagement more modern. So not only using the traditional practices, but combining them with newer best practices, which will help us to identify and remove barriers to participation. So we're looking at an engagement in which folks are not going to be excluded from the process on the basis of, say, race, gender, or class. So the idea is that all groups have access to the resources and the opportunities necessary to be able to fully participate. And then on the back end of this, we would like that differences in project outcomes won't be predicted on the basis of, say, race, class, gender, or ability, or other dimensions of identity. So the insights from these often underrepresented groups in our process and underserved in our services, these groups, their insights would be reflected in the project outcomes. So we'd like for the systemic barriers that they face, the inequities that they face, to be addressed proactively. And also we continue to acknowledge them in our reports and our recommendations as well in the projects that we do. So we are currently in the process of developing a public engagement guidebook, which we hope will provide us with a more coordinated HRM-wide approach to our engagement to allow us to be more effective, to create accessible, barrier-free engagement practices as well. And we continue to learn from the various groups that we serve, so better inclusion in our processes. So we leverage their knowledge, their expertise. We recognize them as competent and capable agents who should be part of our process throughout. And that's been made possible largely by the support of the Diversity and Inclusion Office / African Nova Scotian Affairs Integration Office, who have been helping us with their advice, their great knowledge, in-depth knowledge of the community, and the most culturally appropriate approaches to engaging them fully.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Maps. Leah, earlier in the presentation, had mentioned a social policy committee, and I was just wondering if any of our panelists would be able to provide us with an update about what that committee is doing right now.
Yeah, sure. Hi, it's Paul Johnston here. As mentioned earlier, I'm the Managing Director of Government Relations and External Affairs with HRM. So I'll do a quick kind of intro, and then maybe I'll turn it over to Mary, who's the real brains behind the Social Policy Committee. But about a year ago now, as mentioned during the presentation, Council approved a social policy for HRM, and there's 3 theme areas that were identified, and conveniently you can see them all reflected in the regional planning review in the presentation today. So they're housing and homelessness, food security, and connected communities are kind of the three overall theme areas that were identified. So as a result of that work and the policy the council passed, we put together a social policy team or committee within HRM. So it's an internal committee at this point, consisting of representatives from business units throughout the municipality. And again, as mentioned earlier, social policy is kind of an interesting area to work in because it's an area that the municipality doesn't necessarily have the quote unquote mandate in a lot of cases to address, but we certainly play in that area every day when you think of those theme areas that I mentioned, primarily the housing area in terms of the regional plan. And then a lot of the great work that Letitia has been doing on food security that she just mentioned in an earlier answer. So that team has been together for slightly less than a year. And really the overall focus for the first little while has been figuring out kind of, to use the cliche, breaking down silos internally and figuring out how collectively as a municipality we can start to address and advance these areas. So there's been a lot of good work. The team has really gotten its legs underneath it in the last few months, I think, and we're starting to embark now on a bit more of a strategic planning process to figure out how we can really push these theme areas forward at the municipal level over the next number of months and number of years. So I think that's kind of the high level overview of what the team's all about and what they've been up to. And I'll ask maybe Mary if you have anything further to add. Feel free. If not, we can move to the next question. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I would just kind of like to reiterate that the social policy team has really helped to kind of advance cross collaboration across the municipality. Prior to having the social policy team, we didn't have an ability for people or for staff at HRM to get together to focus on issues that are cross-cutting and really help to problem solve them. The social policy team was initiated shortly after the pandemic began. So early on, we focused on distributing funding we received through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and we were able to use the social policy team to help figure out what projects we should be focusing on that align with the 3 focus areas. So we were able to pick some really neat projects through that work, and I would say that was one of our first deliverables as a team. And we've also, throughout the past year, invited external stakeholders in to present to the team. And we found the team to be a really good space for these presenters to come and kind of let us know what they're working on and how we as an organization can best support them. And so we'll continue to do that going forward. But like Paul had mentioned, we're also focusing now on how we can be strategic as a team and really help to align the work of the social policy with other initiatives that are currently underway, like this regional plan review and how we can best support that. So that's just a quick overview, but yeah, the social policy team, I think, has added value so far, and we're looking forward to where it can go next.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Paul and Mary. Just a reminder to our attendees, if you're interested in submitting a question, the chat bar is to the right of the presentation screen and you can submit them at any time. Just like thinking about, you know, as hopefully we get into a phase where we're able to do a little bit more travel, Airbnbs obviously before COVID had become a very prominent topic related to housing availability. So I'm wondering just what the municipality has been, how the municipality has been working on Airbnbs. And I'm going to direct this question to Jill.
Thank you very much. So prior to the pandemic, HRM had prepared a report looking at Airbnbs, and we had completed a region-wide survey too, trying to get a gauge or understand as to how residents were impacted by Airbnbs. Is it something they welcomed in their neighborhoods? Is it something they felt as though there were concerns about? And while we did hear about definitely some of the benefits of Airbnb, making it more flexible to travel, having new people in their neighborhood, which can sometimes be fun, there were a lot of concerns about how this impacted established neighborhoods. If your neighbor is changing on a weekly basis, kind of the stress that can involve. Also, the impact that it was having on the housing market too was something that really became an issue. I think people are well aware that our vacancy rate is quite low. And so even though, you know, I think about 1% of our housing market has been lost to Airbnbs, well, that number is really low. That does have a significant impact on our vacancy rate. So it is something that we are exploring. Through that report and through the analysis, through the survey and research that we had done through that work, Council did direct us to draft a regulatory bylaw. So that's something that we're working on right now. We're hoping to have a public survey out in the upcoming months to gauge how people feel about the direction we're looking to pursue with this regulatory bylaw. And then a part of that project too will be updating our land use bylaws to include terminology around short-term rentals, because most of our bylaws, except for maybe center plan, were written prior to the existence of short-term rentals or the prevalence of short-term rentals. So we're looking to update our bylaws as well too, so we can deal with them as a land use.
That's great. Thank you, Jill. My next question will be for Letitia. I think that one of the most important parts of our local food network is having sources of local food. So I'm wondering how the municipality is thinking about urban agriculture at a local scale.
Great, thanks. Good question. I mean, I would say because of our geography and the fact that the majority of our prime agriculture land, oh, it's saying that I'm muted. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Sorry, for some reason I'm getting the message that I'm muted. Okay, great. So the majority of our sort of prime agricultural land was unfortunately developed at times when we were really growing our communities. So we have a few pockets of prime soils, which we really need to protect, but we also have a lot of opportunity space embedded right in our urban landscape. So I would say for our local food system, urban agriculture is probably one of the most important things that we could be focusing on. This is an example really of how the regional plan and Just Food could be working hand in hand for this. So with the regional plan, where it's a lot more about land use and sort of land use regulations, there's an opportunity for us to make sure that we're removing the barriers to having urban agriculture and food uses in our personal landscape, you know, all around us in our urban landscape. So we could remove some of the barriers and also create opportunities for urban agriculture. So whether that's things like requiring edible landscaping as part of our new developments, or making sure that our zoning permits food outlets like grocery stores or healthy corner stores. So we can make sure that we provide those opportunities and we reduce barriers through the regional plan. But then we can look possibly through Just Food on how do we create incentives for those opportunities. So it's not really enough just for us to create the ability for people to do that. We really want to look at what can we do to make it more attractive for us to have more urban agriculture right in part of our landscape, and really normalize urban agriculture in part of what our cities look like. So, you know, there's lots of things that could be done in terms of incentives through Just Food. So whether that's, you know, funding, or we could look at tax incentives, there's all kinds of different opportunities that are open to us through Just Food.
Great, thanks so much, Letitia. My next question is for MAPS. I'm wondering what the best ways to engage with communities that are traditionally underrepresented are, in your opinion.
So thank you, Kathleen. I think we need to begin by asking the question, why are we missing out on these communities? How are they being excluded? And exclusion includes, but isn't limited to, exclusion on the basis of linguistic, cultural, economic, or accessibility, or age, gender-related factors. So it's not enough to say someone is missing from the table. We need to start anticipating and addressing the barriers, why they're missing from the table. We need to understand how and why these persons are excluded, and how we can work to foster a more inclusive and accessible engagement. So, for example, within our public engagement guidebook, we've built in tools that will prompt folks who are planning engagement to consider factors such as language. So which languages are being spoken? Is translation available, written and oral? Is it needed? We're thinking about meeting locations. What's an accessible meeting location? Is it safe? Is it a neutral meeting place? Often we have a tendency to invite folks into our spaces. Are we going out to communities enough? Is there a central location that we can find? Should we be considering maybe multiple meetings at varying locations? How can stakeholders or participants be given enough time, ample time to participate? Are we working within budget constraints? So maybe we could think of more flexible budgets to allow for us to have a more accessible engagement. When we think about communication, do the communication methods that we use accommodate everyone? Are we providing, say, screen readers for people with visual impairments, maybe Braille or sign language? These types of services are available. They often require that we put in a lot of time and effort on the front end to make it possible, but they are out there. When we think about meeting times, we often don't consider the fact that some folks have responsibilities, they have dependents to care for. So our meetings accommodating those times as well. To what degree could we possibly consider childcare or as a barrier for participation? Though the structure of our meetings as well, sometimes different meeting structures aren't appropriate. We could consider opening ourselves up to more community circles as an approach. They tend to foster more of the trust-based conversations, trust-building conversations, as well as getting into some of the stories that we miss out on. And stories are a key aspect of culturally appropriate engagement, understanding that maybe our open houses or our informational meetings aren't the best way to get at some of the really detailed experiences that we might be wishing to get from the feedback. Also technical knowledge, that's one that's also becoming more prominent. So a lot of folks have been in the past and continue to be excluded on the basis of their technical knowledge about, say, the planning process or how bureaucracies operate. So we could, on our part, do better to educate. In the same way that we're providing information, we're also building capacity. So we need to build that into our processes as well, so that we are not only just taking the feedback. It's not a transactional process, but also a reciprocal one. So it's a give and take, and in that way we build relationship with communities. So I think these are some of the steps we can take to include groups that have been traditionally excluded. If we recognize these barriers and we start to address them proactively, we can start to get at these groups and definitely have a more representative participation and obviously a more reflective public service.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Maps. So my next question would be around rapid housing. I'm wondering, Jill, if you would mind giving us a bit of a description of what rapid housing is and how we're considering it at the municipality.
For sure, I'd be more than happy to. So the Rapid Housing Initiatives was a federally funded program where HRM was given $8.7 million to develop a minimum of 28 affordable housing units. These were units that are directed towards those in need of deep affordability. So those who are on either income assistance, those who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. The caveat of the funding is that the developments need to be completed within 1 year, so very, very tight timeline. And it could only be for developments that would bring new housing to the market. So it had to be either constructing new housing, converting non-market housing, so like a commercial building into a residential building, or rehabilitating an uninhabitable building. So if a building has been vacant for a certain amount of time, would not meet minimum occupancy standards, the money could be used to rehabilitate that building as well too. And then part of if it's new construction as well too, it has to be modular, but that just speaks to the need for the speed of the construction of the development. So this funding was announced towards the end of October of 2020. And by the end of November, HRM was able to pool a team together to put out a call of submissions to nonprofits to see who could build this housing. Because HRM isn't a provider of housing ourselves, we had to partner with a nonprofit who could actually build and monitor the housing. And so within that month, we were able to put out a call for submissions and select 3 successful candidates. I will say one of the reasons for the success of moving this project so quickly was due to our relationships through the Housing and Homelessness Partnership, through the relations that we have with working with other groups on the anti-poverty solution strategy. So we already have a lot of those contacts. So we were able to move fairly quickly with that, which was great. The 3 developments that we were able to provide funding for include the ADSM for Women and for Children. They're building 25 units directed towards women or women with children. The Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, which is providing 10 bedrooms through shared housing and 7 individual units directed towards the urban Indigenous population. And that will be part of a larger development that has a shelter component and programming as well. And then the North End Community Health Association is building a 10-unit or 10-bedroom shared housing development that will be directed towards our African Nova Scotian community and urban Indigenous populations as well too. So we're currently working with those three groups to get the buildings developed. This has been, there's still lots of work that needs to be done to get these buildings completed by the end of the year and occupied by March of 2022. But it has been a great experience so far, and really looking forward to getting these 52 units online.
Thanks, Jill. That's a great initiative. I think for our next question, it would be around some alternative ways that we look at planning in communities, in particular community land trusts and those kinds of things. I think I'll probably direct this question to Kate Green, but if any of the other members of the panel have any thoughts, please feel free to add them. But just sort of any examples of how community land trusts could be used, or successful examples in locally or sort of across the country.
Sure. Thanks for your question, Kathleen. And community land trusts are something new that the municipality has just started exploring. So it's a different way that communities might be able to participate in land ownership and then hold that land in common within community and sort of build housing and actually hold that land in hands of community over time. So you can almost, if you envision that idea of that housing being held for social purposes, then you can, as it changes hands, actually control the price of the housing so that people are able to continue to access living on that land. So it's a tool that we're exploring and seeing if it's a way of giving communities, I guess, more power to control how they live in their community, and especially combat raising prices around affordable housing. The other thing we're looking at is, how the municipality could play a role in being a resource to maybe help NGOs try and create that type of structure of housing. We're looking to examples across the country. There's examples in Vancouver where the municipality actually uses public land as an asset, allows for NGOs or other groups to come and build housing on that land. And actually, you can, because you have multiple pieces of land, you can capitalize that on that as an asset and more quickly build housing at an affordable rate. In the other thing that is interesting that we've learned about is that municipalities in Vancouver, other places, actually retain expertise in-house that are able to help NGOs or community groups build housing, get involved in housing. So one of the things that's been identified that NGOs are missing is expertise in how to go about building housing. Actually, purchasing land is really challenging. So exploring ways the municipality can use in-house expertise, lend that out to NGOs as they need it, and help people build like social purpose housing, really. So those are some of the ways we're exploring new models for ownership that can help with building more affordable housing in our communities.
Great.
Let me just add to that, if that's all right. One of the initiatives that HRM recently adopted was a new surplus category in our for our surplus lands. We have a category that's specific to affordable housing. So while it's not a community land trust, we are starting to get ourselves set up to be able to identify land that is appropriate for affordable housing. Should we ever be in a position that we're able to establish a municipal community land trust or be able to support a nonprofit community land trust, we're already starting to identify land that's appropriate for such a use.
Great. Thanks, Kate and Jill. Our next question is sort of around as we've sort of mentioned over the course of the presentation, there's a bit of a complicated relationship between the province and the municipality and how we both work on social housing. So I'm wondering if members of the panel and maybe Paul could talk about how we've been working with the province and, trying to maybe get changes to our charter to allow us to do the kind of social policy work that we are interested in doing.
Yeah, hi again. I'll take an initial shot at answering that, and then I'm sure there's members of the panel that might have more specific examples they want to bring up. So, as we've talked about all along, we can't advance a lot of our social policy priorities or initiatives alone. We need the province working in partnership with us. We need community partners working with us because these are kind of broad and complex issues. So I guess in terms of our work with the province, it kind of it oversimplifies it, but it falls into two kind of categories. There's the whole area of, partnership and relationship building. Housing and homelessness is a great example where, again, there's a lot of initiatives that we can take as a municipality, but the province has the mandate to do a lot of that work, so we need to work pretty closely with them. So in that specific example, like we at the staff level, we build really good relationships, or have built, I think, really good relationships with community services and infrastructure and housing staff, meet with them regularly. Sometimes it's just as simple as sharing information on a regular basis to understand kind of what staff at the province are up to and what staff at the municipality are up to, and trying to identify gaps or areas that we can work a little more closely together. So that's kind of the first piece. The second piece is a bit more mechanical, and that's what was referenced in the question around legislative changes, infrastructure programming, that sort of thing. So again, as mentioned earlier, a lot of the tools or the levers that the municipality wants to implement or enact, especially in the area of housing, I think is probably the best example, requires permission from the province through legislation to do. We've had some pretty good success in the last couple of years in working with the province to get a few of those legislative changes, and there's several more that we're still working on with them. But it's a similar process where we work with staff in the provincial departments that are responsible. For example, for the municipal charter is probably the best example, which is kind of governed by municipal affairs. So we work with them to prioritize and identify what those legislative changes may be that we need in order to advance some of this work, and just work with them to try to get those priority areas through to the legislature, and then hopefully have a successful outcome in terms of getting some of those specific areas we need to move like the housing portfolio forward, for instance. So it's kind of a high level overview of how we work with them generally. I don't know if anybody has any more specific examples they want to sort of tag onto that.
Great, thanks, Paul. I'll probably wrap up after this one, I would say, unless we have any additional questions coming in. But my question is for Letitia, and it's just around the mobile food market. If you could sort of describe this initiative and how it's going, that would be great.
Great. So the mobile food market has been in operation to 2016. And it is intended to bring healthy and affordable food to communities that are at a higher risk for food insecurity or have some challenges in accessing food. From my perspective, and I think I can speak for the rest of the Just Food team on this, the mobile food market is really a great example of the kind of collaborative effort and the collective impact that's required to really progress such a complicated issue as food security. So it started out, the champions for the development of the mobile food market were the Ecology Action Centre, Nova Scotia Health Authority, and HRM. And we now have MetroWorks acting as the host for the mobile food market. And really came together to bring in-kind contributions, things like access to a Halifax transit bus, to facilities, to expertise, and sort of leadership for the development of the mobile food market. But as it's evolved, the mobile food market really intends to have communities decide what are the markets that they need to serve their needs and to serve what their capacity is and the kinds of infrastructure they have on location. So the mobile food market works with these community teams, these local teams to help figure out what are the types of markets that they need, and then delivers things like either delivery so they can have their own markets or do their own community food distribution, or they come in and set up a market on the bus and or on the new truck, and sort of have all the infrastructure there to have a mobile food market, or they deliver produce packs. Like, there's all kinds of different relationships and different ways that the markets are rolling out in communities based on what communities are saying that they need. So it's that really making sure that we recognize that communities are the experts in terms of what they need when we're creating social policy. So, it's really about working all together. Another important partner in this is the province, who's been a consistent funder for the mobile food market since it began, and are really part of the decision making and support that happens for the mobile food market. So again, it's just one of those examples of how we really need to come together to progress these complex issues. And it's about figuring out what are the best pieces and the ways that your organization can progress things, and then working with others in the ways in which they're best at moving things forward, and sort of putting aside a lot of the bureaucracy and the barriers that are often in place for us to work together to really recognize that we need to get out of our own way and help communities.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Letitia. Shala, if you could take us to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to thank everyone for attending, and to thank our panelists for their time and their expertise. As I mentioned before, if you would like to submit comments or questions privately outside of the event, you're certainly welcome to. You can visit our project website at www.shapeyourcityhalifax.ca/regional-plan. Email us at regionalplan@halifax.ca, or give us a call at 902-233-2501. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.